Good morning, YouTube. I'm glad to see you come back to see some more of this. This is where we left off last time. I got the miter saw all in there. Both cabinets are in. Now we have some other stuff to do. I had mentioned that I had to wait for my budget to renew. And while the budget's renewing, the best thing to do is tear out this old miter saw station. Now we're going to do that because I need the plywood for the shelves and the dividers that are in the other cabinet. I want to save as much of this plywood as possible because I don't want to buy any new plywood. Now, this plywood that I'm trying to salvage from this miter station is actually on its third go round. This will be the fourth go around for this plywood. The more plywood I can save, the less money I have to spend, the more cool stuff I can buy. This was the first go around for this plywood. I tore that door out and put these French doors in that I got for free off Facebook Marketplace. Once I did that, I built my first miter station you can see here. So that brings us to this week's project. You can see I have all of these doors installed on the bottoms. So I have to make doors for this upper cabinet. Now this upper cabinet I did on Labor Day weekend. I didn't record any of it. The construction is all the same as this cabinet and that cabinet. So I didn't really feel the need to record another one. The only thing I did different on this cabinet is I put a 13-degree bevel on the sides. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but that's a lot of work when you consider I had to put a 13-degree bevel on everything else. The shelves, the sides, I mean, everything was freaking 13-degree bevel everywhere. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started on these doors. We're going to use a rail and stile bit. Here we go. This rail and stile set that I'm using is a Bosch set that you can buy from Lowe's. I think it's like $100. When I use this set, I like to run the stile bit first on all of my pieces, the short ones and the long ones. That way, later on, when I go to set up my rail bit, I can adjust the depth higher or lower. That way, everything fits nice and snug with the stile, and it turns out pretty well. Once I have everything dialed in, I replace the back on this little jig I built that keeps everything nice and solid at 90 degrees against my fence, and it reduces all the tear out. This jig is phenomenal when it comes to using this bit set. So you may be wondering how to get the measurement for your plywood. Well, your plywood is going to be the same as your rail pieces are going to be. So I cut mine just a little bit shorter, that way it doesn't interfere with the seam. And the best way I found to do that is to take my stile pieces, my longer pieces, and clamp them to my table at the measurement I need for my doors to be overall. Then I can measure the inside of the cutout, and that gives me an exact measurement of what I need my rails and my plywood to be. And I found it much easier to do that than try to figure out all the math. Alright, so now all it's left to do is assembly. And you're going to watch me do this the absolute wrong way. So let me tell you the better way to do it. It took me about 3 doors to figure this out. Put your plywood into your stile, like this. Dry fit your rails on either end so that you know where you want them to be. Then take them out, put the glue on your rails on only one side. Put everything back in and tap it into place, and it'll be all nice and flush. Once you have that done, then you're going to be to the point to where I am now. That is where you put your glue on your other rails, and then you can glue your other stile on and tap it into place. That is the better way to do this, not what you just watched me to do. I mean, that was way harder than it had to be. If you do what I said and not what I did, then All of what I am doing now will not be required in your assembly. Your assembly will go much smoother than watching me do all this beating and banging on my door. But just in case it doesn't, make sure you use a piece of scrap wood when trying to hammer these in place. It'll save you a lot of dings and dents in your nice new door. Once you have everything where you think it's flush and it all looks good to you, go ahead and clamp it into place where your rails meet your stiles. That's the only place you really need any clamping force, because you really shouldn't put glue all the way down your stiles to the plywood. Plywood really shouldn't shrink or expand, but you never know, and you don't want to rip it apart later on when it dries out. Make sure you check for square before setting it off to dry, because getting it square later will be a pain in the butt. So I made my stiles just a little bit longer, that way I could perform this next task. I'm going to take just about a 1/16 off of each side just to clean up the edges of the tops and bottoms of the doors. I guess it's not necessary, you could always sand it, but I think it's just quicker and a lot cleaner to be able to run it through the table saw, and it leaves a really nice surface. I do sand it a little bit, but it doesn't require nearly as much. It just takes that squeeze out off and it looks nice and clean. The rail and stile bit I used has an OG profile on it, so the interior of these doors are trimmed out in OG. But the rest of my cabinets all have a 45-degree chamfer on all the drawers and on the tops, so I put a 45-degree chamfer on all of my doors. That way everything matches and looks nice and clean, I guess. You could use whatever bit you want, whether it's a round over or if you prefer the OG on the outside too. I personally like the 45-degree chamfer. Now, of course, with every project, you have the daunting task of sanding everything down. I went 80, 120, all the way up to 220 on these doors because I wanted to be nice and smooth, and they're probably going to get a lot of finger traffic throughout their use. So I wanted them to be nice and smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and stain these with that min-waxed aged barrel like I have used on the rest of this project. And again, you may not like the way it looks. I personally think it looks great, so that's what I'm going to use. You may want to stay with a natural color, and that's fine. Everything is up to you how you do your cabinets in your shop. I like this aged barrel look because it stands away from my pallet wood walls, and I think it just looks fantastic. I use this min-wax stain because it's fairly inexpensive, it's easy to apply, and again, it is shop furniture. So it's nothing that I'm going to be eating off of, so it doesn't need to be food grade. And the smell, well, it dissipates in a couple of days. So it's definitely good enough for shop furniture. So the hardware I'm going to be installing is just some, I want to say, farmhouse style hinges. Now these hinges come with two different types of screws. You want to separate those. And I'm using a story stick to make sure my hinges are the exact same distance from the edges. It may not matter to you, but my OCD kind of kicks in and I want them to all be the same. So I use a story stick. Quick and easy, just like that. The reason you want to separate your screws is because 3 of them have flat heads and 2 of them have round heads. So to install these doors by myself, I clamped a kick plate to the front of my cabinet. Then I set my doors on top of that kick plate, and I can just go ahead and screw them in. I mean, it cannot be any easier than what it is doing it this way. Unless I had like a magnetic drill bit, which would make this a lot easier because these tiny little screws and my fat clumsy fingers drop screws all the time. So a magnetic drill bit would definitely be helpful in this situation. Once they're all installed, we can go ahead and remove the kick plate, and look at that. Beautiful doors. Now we have to figure out how to open them. You could go like that, and that works. But I have fancy hardware, so we are going to use the fancy hardware. And because I used the leftover stock, we are going to have to put a shim on the bottom of my Kreg jig. And because it is such a weird angle, I can't get a clamp on there. So I'm just going to hold it up there and just touch it enough so that I know where to drill all the way through. I had mentioned using the leftover stock. The leftover stock I used was from the bottom drawers. I cut those ones at 2 inches off a 3.5 inch board. So I had a bunch of 1.5 inch stock left over. That is the stock that I am referring to when I built these upper doors, was the 1.5 inch stock. Now, I don't know how many doors are built out of 1.5 inch stock, but mine are, and the Kreg jig will not work for 1.5 inch stock apparently. So that's why I had to use that shim, which was about a 1/2 inch shim, and I guess 2 inch stock is what it's designed for. So that'll do it for today. I've got lots more storage than I had before, and it's all covered up for your viewing pleasure. This is how I make cabinet doors. I'm not sure what these would cost down at Lowe's or at Home Depot or Menards or wherever y'all buy your cabinet doors at. But all they costed me was the 1 sheet of plywood. I got all 8 doors out of the 1 sheet. And the hardware, which I actually got most of this hardware on sale for $1.52 because Lowe's was phasing them out. I did have to order 3 more, but you know, it is what it is. These are professional grade looking doors. I think they're professional looking. They look a hell of a lot better than I could have ever made before. But that rail and style bit really does make a difference. So, you want professional looking doors? Go get yourself a rail and style bit and some pallet wood and go to town. Alright y'all, I'll see you in the next video.